Very good Wednesday to everybody. Thanks for clicking on to today's European Outlook. We continue with this colder east versus milder west of Europe. And when we look at North America as well, we are starting to see the colder air digging south once again. But eastern areas of the country remaining reasonably mild, especially down across the south. But that is going to change over the next several days. And that is going to influence our weather here in Western Europe as well. But we are looking at a contrast in a clash. Milder air moving in from the southwest, colder air attempting to move in from the northeast. We've been in this kind of battle zone. The models have been kind of back and forth in terms of mild versus cold. Looks as if the mild may eventually start to win that battle as we start to see changes taking place over North America. We start to see Arctic air getting driven back into the eastern North American pattern. We then see a more active jet stream as a consequence. And essentially, while we've got two lobes of tropospheric polar vortex dropping south into the middle latitudes, one over North America, one over Europe, we've got the coldest air of the winter so far into central areas of Europe. But it looks as if it's going to be getting fought back because of the more prominent Atlantic flow coming in. So you can see here, by the time we reach Friday 21 UTC, we've got milder air at 850 millibars, or 5,000 feet above our heads, starting to move in over the top of some low-level cold air. And that actually presents a freezing rain threat as we move into the weekend itself. Now, I'll compare the GFS with ECM in just a second, but I want to show you the ICON model real quick with regards to the possibility of some freezing rain. The reasons why we're going to see some freezing rain is we've got milder, about 1,050 meters above sea level. And what is going to happen is that milder air runs over the top of some colder air trapped underneath. And as the rain falls through the milder air in the mid-levels, it then drops into a colder environment. The rain is falling too quickly for it to freeze and transition to snow. So therefore we see super cold water droplets reaching the surface in parts of central and eastern England, in particular parts of Northern Ireland, possibly southern Scotland, as we move through the course of early weekend. So this is the the ICON model here, looking at the winter overview. So this is looking at the precipitation, snow depth, and thickness values here. And we've also got at the very bottom, difficult to see, I do apologise for that, but the actual orangey red colours here in the bar represent freezing rain. Again, very difficult to see it, and I'm sorry about that. But we play through the loop here. We've got this system that is winding up well out to the west of Ireland here. The centre never really truly approaches the UK and Ireland, but its moisture band will reach the UK. It bumps up into the higher pressure, drier air. Some of that moisture will get sucked out of the atmosphere. But you can see here as we move into the early portions of Saturday, but just pick out these little orange specks here over the Pennines. That is the ICON model indicating that we're going to see some potential freezing rain. So areas such as possibly to the east of Manchester, between Manchester and Leeds, for example, around Huddersfield, Harrogate, we could see some freezing rain, even into York, for example. Some of these areas of central and northern England may pick up on some freezing rain and create some treacherous conditions. We've got rain to the further south over England and southwest England and Wales here. We've got possibly more in the way of sleet and snow, and a mix towards the east of England, and then up into Scotland as well, where the colder air resides. We'll continue to play through, and you can see here this moisture trying to push eastwards into that colder air. It'll be interesting to see in terms of what snow we may see out of this. Looking at snow depth of the ICON model, and this is how it's looking. So if we play it through back to the here and now, you can see here that we are starting to increase a little bit more in terms of snow cover across central areas of Europe as Arctic air drives south and southwestwards, picking up in some snow cover across the North Pennines, North York Moors, into Northumberland, possibly high ground of Tyneside, into the borders, southern Scotland, and possibly central Highland as well. Continuing to play through all the way towards the early portions of next week. Not a great deal to speak about in terms of snow cover. Looking at the ECMWF model and what's it showing for snowfall. So you can see here it's picking up in a little bit of snow over high parts of Northern Ireland, the Republic of Ireland. Then as we move in through the course of Saturday, we've got more in the way of snow cover across the North Pennines, northeastern England, southern Scotland, central Highland region. Could pick up some snow according to the ECMWF model. Possibly some reasonable amounts of snow, maybe 2 to 5, locally 10 centimetres in some high elevations of northern England, southern and central Scotland, as can be seen here in the model. This is all the way out to tomorrow, next day, Wednesday. So looking at the GFS and see what it is indicating for the same time frame, and I think the GFS is indicating that milder tends to win the battle a little bit more than what the ECMWF and other models are suggesting. So looking at the models, I'm going to show you really the upper level heights at 500 millibars first and foremost. So this is off the GFS ensemble, and a couple of interesting things. We've got this stretched out ridge of high pressure extending anywhere from the Ural Mountains of Russia all the way to Iceland here. We've got the low pressure to the south-southwest of the UK and Ireland. We've had a situation here where you've not managed to get colder. We don't have much colder over Western Asia and Central Europe at the moment. And what that's been doing is this has been creating this kind of nagging easterly, but really this easterly has been a non-event in terms of cold. Now, it has to be said that I did think that we would turn colder over the last 5 or 7 days with that easterly flow. I thought the air mass further east over Eastern Europe, western areas of Russia, may have turned colder as we progressed through the past 5 days or so, feeding in a more pronounced easterly as time went on. I did also highlight that really once you get towards the middle portions of February, that is the time frame that things could get somewhat more interesting in terms of a more bona fide Arctic or polar air mass getting into the European pattern. That is, kind of flagging as it now starts to appear as we move over the next several days. But essentially what's happened is we've had a ridge of high pressure over the eastern United States. We've had this ridge over northern areas of Europe here with a lack of cold underneath it, hence why we've not had much in the way of a cold easterly develop. Now, as we play through, what's interesting is the two areas of high pressure have started to hook up and starting to really force the negative Arctic oscillation. That's forcing cold to start to get pushed. This high, this building over the Arctic, is essentially pushing Arctic air away from the pole and into the middle latitude pattern. But because of the stretched out nature of this high, there's been no door allowed to open in terms of releasing some of this more potent cold into Europe, because the high pressure has essentially shut the door. But what is happening is we're seeing now the potential of -10, -15 Celsius at 850 dropping into Central and Eastern Europe. It's because this high is then getting pulled into Greenland here. So instead of it being focused over Scandinavia and northeastern Europe, as we start to see the troughs and lows moving across eastern North America, that's allowing the high to then get shifted and pulled into Greenland, forcing the heights to continue building over the Arctic. But this essentially is what's going to open the door now to colder getting driven into Central and Eastern Europe. The problem that we've got here in Western Europe, UK and Ireland, is that as this high then gets pulled west, out of Scandinavia, into Greenland, over the Arctic, allowing the cold air to then get emptied into Central and Eastern Europe, we're starting to activate a more pronounced jet because the other piece of the polar vortex is dropping into North America, activating a more pronounced jet, and then we're starting to see that extension of the trough pushing eastwards over the North Atlantic and moving towards the UK and Ireland. So you've got this kind of battle, so to speak. So I hope that is relatively clear to understand. The door has been shut for the last 5 to 7 days over Europe because of the stretched nature of the high to the north. With a lack of cold air over Central and Eastern Europe, the easterly has been essentially a non-event in terms of wintry precipitation, bitterly cold conditions. We've had a nagging easterly flow. It's felt cold. We've had cloud cover and we've had breeze. So the temperatures have not dropped below freezing at nighttime. It's been a rather disappointing, poor, pretty dreary type of cold pattern, if you will. If you're going to get cold, you want to have a proper cold spell. If you're going to have mild, you want to have a proper mild spell. But we're starting to see the pattern evolve such that we're seeing the high building over Greenland. We're starting to see that trough now starting to shift east. That La Nina-esque ridge is going to start getting beaten down as the Arctic air continues to penetrate further south over the United States. Got these areas of low pressure moving off the east coast. That is going to then continue to fire up a stronger jet stream. And eventually what happens is we'll start to see, as the Arctic air starts to move towards the UK and Ireland from the east, we're going to see a more pronounced Atlantic coming back into play once again. So the two are going to fight against one another. But the GFS ensemble here is indicating as we move towards Saturday, 15th of February, we've got deep areas of low pressure spiraling over the North Atlantic here. Its associated frontal systems are going to spread moisture into the UK and Ireland. Milder in the mid-number levels, or the mid-levels anyway. Colder trapped underneath. We've got that freezing rain threat, rain, sleet, snow mix across several areas of the UK over the course of the weekend. But it's what happens beyond that that's going to be the question. This is the GFS operational latest run. You can see here that the Arctic air, there's that minus 10, minus 15 Celsius air, even minus 20 Celsius air showing up as this one of two pieces of the tropospheric polar vortex finally descends into Europe because of the high shifting towards Greenland, as I've said. But it's as this cold air then starts to drift its way southwestwards, we've got all the while a deeper low spinning over the Atlantic. That's then throwing some reasonably mild air out ahead of it to the east of the circulation itself and pushing against that incoming cold from the northeast. So you can see here off the GFS model, we're flirting with something particularly cold here, essentially just on the eastern side of the North Sea. We're seeing minus 10 Celsius at 850. All the while we've got the temperatures close to the zero mark at 850 over Ireland and Northern Ireland here. So this tug of war, this collision, this clash, looks as if the Atlantic is essentially winning that battle according to the latest run of the GFS. Looking at the ECMWF, it has been shown a little bit more perseverance, a little bit more strength of that southward push of the polar air. You can see as we move into Saturday, you've got that big dividing line here between minus 5 and plus 5 Celsius between northeastern Scotland and southwestern England and Ireland here. There's that minus 10, minus 15 Celsius air mass continuing to drive southwards over Europe. And again, thanks to this deep low spinning out over the central Atlantic, it's trying to throw milder Atlantic air from the subtropics into the UK and Ireland, and it's resisting against this cold coming in from the northeast. But the ECMWF does have a little bit of luck in terms of trying to push some of that colder air into the UK, but it's all very, very marginal. And look at the time frame. It's Friday the 21st of February here. So it looks as if the Atlantic essentially is beginning to win that battle between incoming polar air and milder air coming in from the southwest here. But you can see how much of a fine margin it has been. And, it's going to be interesting, nevertheless, to see how all pans out. Looking at the latest temperatures, and then we'll finish off with that because it's time to leave the house and head out for a night's work. But looking at the European view, and let's have a look at the 850 temperatures, or the 2 meter temperature anomalies for the next 5 days, next 6 to 10 days. And you can see it's starting to moderate here off the GFS ensemble here. This is the period now, 17th through the 22nd of February here, which is interesting. And then play through, you can see here it's generally milder than average. What's the CFSV2 looking like? Week 1 looks like this. So it's just trying to update week 1 and then week 2. So the CFSV2 is now starting to back away from holding the cold. It looks as if the Atlantic is really going to start to win that battle here. So thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time with more. Bye for now.